the introduction I've always dreamed of. Thank you, Max. All right, so today we're going to be talking about the Decentralized Validator Vault, how DeFi products can drive decentralization. And I think that this is going to be fairly interesting. So my name is Will Shannon. I'm a contributor to the Lido DAO and the Node Operator Mechanisms workstream. And today we're going to be talking about the power of something beautiful, right? And that's STETH that's up on the stage there. So I mentioned I work in node operator mechanisms. Really, my day-to-day is focused on node operators, the relationships with the DAO, validators, and then on top of that, thinking about things like infrastructure, resilience, and decentralization. And we're going to talk about that, but we're going to talk about it in the context of what I think is a really, really cool product that was released just in the last few months, and that's called the Distributed or Decentralized Validator Vault. And so this Validator Vault encompasses points from the major DVT providers. And today what we're going to talk about is why this has had an impact on the Lido protocol's decentralization. We're also going to talk about why I think you should care about these points. All right, so in terms of agenda, we're going to cover, like as I mentioned, basically where Lido was last year, the year before, what has changed this year, and then go really into depth on the DVV. Cool. So Lido in 2023, and even in 2022, I personally believe that it's very, very hard to argue that there was a more decentralized or more transparent liquid staking protocol or staking protocol in general versus Lido. If you look at the top 10, and when you consider this list, you're comparing centralized exchanges, other staking protocols, other liquid restaking protocols. Lido a year ago had 37 curated node operators. These node operators were onboarded via periodic onboarding rounds that took place after Lido Node Operator Subgovernance Group evaluations. These evaluations would then go forward for the DAO to consider and vote on. And these 37 node operators were based on, at this point, every single continent except for Antarctica. The most recent onboarding round in a curated node operator onboarded the first Lido operators in Latin America, the first node operators in Africa, and many, many more in the Asia-Pacific region. Because as the things like the Validator and Node Operator Metrics Report, which is a quarterly publication really showcasing the diversity and all the infrastructure of the Lido node operator set demonstrate, these are underrepresented and were underrepresented. And so this was a big step in terms of improving geographic diversity. At the time, also, Lido had leading consensus layer client diversity versus other staking protocols. There was no country with more than 20% of validators, excluding Germany at this point. But listen, I'm not saying that Lido, from a node operator set perspective, was perfect a year ago. It's not perfect now. There's always going to be work to do. But there was two very, very glaring issues, right? There was no solo stakers in the node operator set, no community stakers, and there was no permissionless entry to the protocol. So that has since changed. And that was prompted by, first, a proposal to the DAO known as Hasu's Goose Goals. And these Goose Goals, there was 3 of them. We're going to focus on the second one, and that's that Lido should attract the best validator set in the market. This includes a number of key results, namely permissionless entry, reaching 5,000 node operators within the set, having a performance effectiveness rating in the 80th percentile, and then designing the protocol with risk mitigation and a free market for validation by design. That was followed by 2 proposals to the DAO, the first of which was the simple DVT module. We're going to talk quite a bit about that. And then as well as the community staking module. And so if you heard Dimitri's talk earlier, he covered it really in depth. But this is the first permissionless module that anyone can run a validator using Lido that has been released. It's relevant to this conversation, but to a smaller degree. And so we'll talk about it, but simple DVT will be the main focus. All right, so, what is the simple DVT module? Simple DVT module is the second module added to the protocol, and this took place in February of this year, initially with just a 0.5% share limit. But after the really strong results of simple DVT validators, Obel was just talking in one of the other rooms about their validator performance actually being in line or even better in some cases than the curated set. The DAO voted to increase the share of the simple DVT module to 4%. And let me put what 4% of Lido equals into perspective, right? It's equivalent to over 12,000 validators, over 1% of all Ethereum validators, and these validators are going to be run by 82 clusters. Okay, so what's a cluster? Simple DVT uses distributed validator technology by 2 providers, Obel and SSV Network. And so the best way to think about DVT is basically like running validators, but with a multi-sig. Right? So usually when you run a solo node, you have an execution layer client, a beacon node, a consensus layer client that you're using with your validator clients as well. You have one, like maybe home node that's tied into your ISP, and if you get an outage or if something similar goes wrong, your validator goes offline. DVT makes this way, way improved because all of a sudden you can work in groups of people and there's what's called thresholds. So in the simple DVT case, we use clusters of 7 people. And in those 7 people, if 5 of them are online, the validator will continue to perform all the duties successfully. But this really enables benefits outside of just the resilience of this threshold. Because instead of just having the single execution layer, the single consensus layer client, now every single one of these people can basically be running a different execution layer client, a different consensus layer client. Some of them can be in public cloud. Some of them can be running home nodes. Some of them can be in bare metal in a data center. And on top of that, they can be distributed in different countries. And all of a sudden, this single validator that before had a bunch of single points of failure is now ultra resilient. And on top of that, very, very decentralized. In the Lido case, they're also very secure from a key perspective because all the validators in the simple DVT module have their keys generated via distributed key generation. So, as I mentioned, launched in February 2024. Since that time, over 140 solo stakers are now using the simple DVT module to run validators via Lido. Pretty big change, right? A year ago, 0, now over 140. And that's not all, right? Like the node operator set via simple DVT is on track to expand by over 300 before year end. There's one more cohort that's in the process of onboarding on the Obol side right now, and there's another one via SSV that'll be onboarded in just the next month or so. Cool. So now I really want to focus on these DVT providers, and this is the part where it starts to matter, right? Related to the Distributed Validator Vault. Because I think there's really, really huge benefits that DVT is driving towards the Lido protocol, but there's some pretty interesting things around the vault. So we'll start with SSV. And when I consider that SSV has launched their permissionless mainnet basically just under a year ago, I think the growth they've had is not just like really impressive, but honestly, it's quite jaw-dropping. So SSV now has over 52,000 validators live on mainnet. They have over $5.3 billion of TVL and stake running. And so really, this is one of the fastest growing staking infrastructure-related protocols, I think, in the history of Ethereum. Like, it's pretty amazing. I think it's over 1,100 now. They've had a few more in the last few days, are now running via SSV technology. On top of that, they have this what's called incentivized mainnet program. And so they're helping node operators get started, and they're supporting validators by providing SSV tokens. And currently, there's a 10% increase to staking rewards rates based off of this incentivized mainnet program. That's an important point. Remember that for when we talk about the Distributed Validator Vault. This is really, really core infrastructure for Ethereum, and today SSV on stage here actually proposed to add a module that will go for DAO consideration to the Lido protocol directly. Okay, now Obol. And if you've been reading Vitalik's latest blog posts, or if you've been listening to him speak the last couple of weeks, Vitalik has mentioned Obol by name specifically for squad staking like 5 or 6 times. I was waiting for that. We needed it. So Obol, I think, is really, really impressive, and they've started to grow like extremely quickly. And I think that the pace of this is going to only pick up from here. So Obol launched what's called a contributions program. Contributions are great. You can think of contributions as points. It's basically the exact same thing. But it's not just a normal points program, and that's why this is really quite differentiated. So they have this whole retroactive funding program that's going on along with contributions. And retroactive funding will help support the flywheel of Ethereum decentralization by providing incentives to other projects that are helping secure and decentralize the network. So you run a validator via Obol, you're earning Obol contributions, which are points, but you're also helping fund the decentralization of Ethereum and some of these really important projects that are core to the decentralization of the protocol. So the Obol team has said that contributions will lead to the future access to future ownership in the Obol collective and governance within the collective. So you can take that to mean what I think is quite obvious. Obol, over the last month, has seen pretty massive growth, right? Over 60% month to month. They now have over 4,000 validators running live on mainnet. They have over $2 billion of committed TVL. And just next week, Lido will be adding another 2,000 validators via the simple DVT module to Obol. And so both Obol and SSV will have an equal number of validators when the simple DVT module is fully at capacity at 4%, but Obol is a couple months ahead on this schedule. All right, so we've covered a lot about the DVT infrastructure providers. Now we're going to switch gears just slightly for a second and talk about Lido Alliance. Because the Lido Alliance, as many of you should know, basically is a DAO-endorsed project that helps advance the decentralization of the protocol. You've had the opportunity to hear from many of these different projects, part of the Alliance today on the various stages. Today, we're really going to focus on Mellow. So I think Melo is the perfect fit for the first demonstration of how the Lido Alliance can further drive the decentralization of both Lido and the Ethereum ecosystem. Melo gained a lot of attention at launch, and that was very much driven by this very simple way to create liquid restaking tokens, as well as its integration with Symbiotic. But Melo is a lot more than that. When this opportunity came up with Simple DVT starting to really grow and these points programs basically launching, contributors started talking with Melo contributors about what could we do to help stakers and people out in the ecosystem potentially get access to these things. Melo is not just restaking. It's a full-on DeFi primitive that has a lot of optionality in terms of the products and vaults that can be created on top of it. So let's get to the point. I've said a lot. This is why you should care. Melo contributors, along with Lido contributors, developed what's called the Decentralized Validator Vault. And basically what the DVV does is it directs net new stake to Simple DVT and the community staking module. This is really cool because this vault is basically helping further decentralize the protocol by allowing solo stakers, community stakers, and other participants in CSM and Simple DVT to run validators faster. From a user perspective, you receive the points from these separate DVT providers, as well as points from Obol on top of wrapped staked ETH rewards. So you basically are getting staked ETH plus Obol points, plus SSV points, plus Melo points. It's a pretty cool thing. It's been live for about 2 months, and the growth has really started to pick up in the last month or so as everyone's getting excited. All right, so why you should care. The Lido DAO voted to provide 90% of the DVT provider incentives directed to Lido via these incentive programs to the DVV, okay? So 90% of incentives that Lido validators generate from these protocols go to the Distributed Validator Vault. The DAO also voted in the last month to put 80% of the incentives for users running via DVT within the community staking module also to the vault. This is the second point I think is really quite interesting and relevant for many people in the room. This is basically the only way to get access to these points without running validator infrastructure yourself. And so I would highly encourage you, all of you, to go get started, run a CSM validator. Whether you want to run it with DVT or not, that's up to you. But if you don't run validators for whatever reason, but you're interested in what I think I've described fairly well as two protocols that I think are very core to the future of Ethereum, then this is an interesting way to participate. There's also this Obol points multiplier, which we're going to touch on now. So within Obol, there's currently 2,485 validators live within the Simple DVT module. That's equivalent to 4,000 Obol validators that are live currently. So that's about over 60% of all of the Obol validators live on mainnet are currently within the Simple DVT module. I talked about that 2 billion TVL committed number, so that number will increase, and it's increasing quite quickly. But today, based on the number of points being generated, the DVV is getting a large share of those. I also mentioned that there's going to be another 2,000 Obol validators coming online in the next week. And so very simplistically, Obol points are generated by validators running on mainnet. And if you think about 1 point per validator per day, the DVV is getting a nice share of these. Now, there's this 8x point multiplier, and that's because there's 79,000 ETH staked with Obol validators within the Simple DVT module on mainnet via Lido. But there's only 9.4 thousand ETH within the vault. So basically, when you put ETH in the vault today, you're getting that 8x point multiplier from an Obol perspective that you otherwise would. All right, on the SSV side, they are already incentivizing and have the incentivized mainnet. I think it's a big part of the reason, in addition to the technology, why they've done so well to date. And that's also built into the DVV. So you're getting Obol, you're getting SSV, and on top of that, you're also getting Melo and you're getting Lido, right? Melo is really furthering the decentralization of the Lido protocol with this. Community staking module, Simple DVT module, they have drastically increased the number of node operators participating within Lido, and basically these DVT provider incentives are helping that along. Okay, so today, the Lido node operator set has had really significant growth over the last year. Right? There's now 37 curated node operators. There's over 239 node operators live within the Simple DVT module today. That number is going over 300 within the next couple months. There's what I think really cool and underappreciated, 39 net new and first-time mainnet node operators in general that have been onboarded to Ethereum mainnet via all these programs. Both of these Like hopefully these people, grow up within Simple DBT, they then go to CSM, and then the gold standard, run a node from home. There's over 190 completely permissionless operators that have joined the Lido protocol's node operators via the community staking module, and over 140 solo and community stakers. So again, last year there was no permissionless entry. There's now over 190 people that have joined just in early access in 3 weeks in the CSM. 0 solo and community stakers, now over 140. I think my main point here is that this is really, really a flywheel, right? The protocol is decentralizing. The DVV helps stakers get access to these DVT provider points, which is sort of interesting, and I'm a firm believer that DVT is very much at the future of the Ethereum validator ecosystem. Both these protocols are seeing tremendous success, and on top of that, you're getting wrap staked ETH, OBL, SSV, and Melo. So thanks very much. Appreciate the time.